except for Nathan. I'm sorry. We're missing Mr. Atkinson. All right. The first item is discussion of the contract of the superintendent of schools, including but not limited to the possible termination of the existing contract. Mr. Beaver.
Thank you, ma'am. Well, you know, the superintendent has many responsibilities.
Are we gonna, do you have a motion, or do you want, are we just gonna have discussion? I think we kind of need to.
Okay, what I was going to do is read this and then make a motion.
Okay,
Or do you want me to make a motion and then read this?
I think that's fine if you want to do it that way. Jake, is that acceptable as a lead into the motion, or do you want him to make the motion first? Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Are we going to adopt the agenda and go through our normal?
Since that wasn't on there, I guess we could, probably should do that, but we don't, it's not listed on there for us to vote on. So, all right. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda? Motion by Ms. Powers. Second.
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I'd like for us to consider flip-flopping where we discuss the 81 Act and then get into the superintendent's issue.
I will defer to the attorney on that, but I believe it had to be listed first on the per statute. So we have a motion by Ms. Powers, I believe. Do we have a second? A second by Mr. Beaver. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. The agenda is adopted. Mr. Beaver, I'll turn it over to you for the next item.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Of course, everyone knows the reason we're here. And, you know, the superintendent has many responsibilities, but are focused on a single goal. And that's to provide the best education for our students in the county. This means creating the conditions in which other people can get things done, and above all, in which the teachers in the classroom and the support staff can perform at their best ability. But it is very difficult for any person to perform at their best when they're worried about getting paid correctly, if their retirement's being paid, or if their insurance is being paid. And the state requirements say that employees will be paid correctly and in a timely manner. And we terminated an entire financial department, and our staff is still having problems receiving their pay and benefits correctly. We have 2 annual reports from the State Comptroller's Office. For year 2016, there were 5 findings in which these findings wasn't even addressed. For year 2017, we have 11 findings. And Dr. Marzak has told us time and time again that he hasn't broke any board policies or state regulations. But in accordance with Board Policy 5.802 and TCA 492301, they have been broken. And in these state, the management responsibilities of the superintendent of schools shall extend to all activities of the district, to all phases of the educational program, to all aspects of the financial operation, to all parts of the physical plant, and to conduct all of other duties as may be assigned by the board. The superintendent of schools may delegate these duties together with appropriate authority, but may not delegate or relinquish ultimate responsibility for the results or any portion of accountability. And so, you know, Dr. Marzak, there's only one person that is totally responsible and is held accountable for the shortfalls, financial falls in this system, and that's you. So what I'd like to do, I'd like to make a motion to terminate Dr. Marzak's contract for cause.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Second by Ms. Kinzer. We've heard the motion. Do we have any further discussion? Mr. Bates.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not going to repeat everything we said back in March, but I do want to just maybe highlight some of those items that we discussed before. And Mr. Beaver, I agree with you. I think the only thing that really matters is what's best for the children. That's ultimately, I think that's what's our common goal for all of us. And then also, as we discussed back in March, as far as doing what's in the best interest of our children, in some ways we do have to kind of take a look back. To know where we're going, we have to know where we've been. And once again, when most of us were elected in 2014, I think all of us agree we had serious issues with our academics. And again, how we got there with our academics back in 2014, we can't blame Dr. Marzak for that. This was before he was even here, and we can't even blame the prior director for that. All of us are responsible for how our district got. And it starts at the top with the board. I know that's something that the newspaper article keeps leaving out, but that's the number one thing as far as where the responsibility lies, is with this board. The superintendent's responsible, principals are responsible, teachers are responsible, and also parents. And as I discussed at the last meeting, you can put me at the top of that list as far as parents, because I should have been more informed of what was going on. Again, we as a board back in 2015, as far as what we decided to do to try to turn things around, we brought in Dr. Marzak back in August 2015. We knew full well at that time that he was just one person, that he was not going to be able to do it all alone, that it was going to take all of us, and we also knew that change was not going to happen overnight. Now, at the last meeting, you'll recall that we discussed, well, when Dr. Marzak came in, what did he bring to us? And you'll recall that we had a discussion about vision. And I think in some ways, as far as the vision that Dr. Marzak has brought to this district, it's been very high. In some ways, that's got him in trouble because he set the expectation so high. He's got the excitement so high. But I don't think anybody here can say that Dr. Marzak has not brought vision to this board and vision to this district. And again, in some ways, I think he's a victim of his own vision. Now, we as a district, we're dreaming big. And part of that dreaming big, we're starting to look around. And there's some of the things that we're looking around at and we're not happy with. That's not necessarily a bad thing. In some ways, that's a silver lining in all of this, is that we're all becoming more conscious and we're becoming more aware of where we are as a district, and a lot of things aren't acceptable to us. But again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes being aware of things is the first step in order to making changes. But what else? So we discussed vision at the meeting back in March. What else? Let's examine that as far as Dr. Marzak and this motion that's before the board, whether to terminate him or not. One of the things that I believe Dr. Marzak has helped us do as a county is to help us to establish clear goals and a roadmap for reaching those goals. And what Dr. Marzak, what he calls it, is the 7 keys to college and career readiness. And when you look at those 7 keys, you'll see that for the very first time, our primary focus in this district is about academics, not about architects, not about distractions, but about academics. The bottom line of those keys is that our ultimate goal is for kids to be ready for college or careers. And then when you look at those keys, those 7 keys, you'll see that we have 7 specific stages to concentrate on. So we have that roadmap. Elementary school, we have specific goals to reach in reading and math in 3rd and 4th grade. And this is countywide for every elementary school. In the middle school, the same thing. We have specific goals for our schools to reach by 6th as well as 8th grade. High school, same thing. We have benchmarks. We have clear goals to reach that ultimate goal of making sure that students are college and career ready. And another example in high school is that all of our students hit the ACT benchmarks of 21 or higher by the time they graduate. Now, that's a very high goal. That's a very high goal. But we know what to concentrate on now as a district. We're not floundering around. And that's something Dr. Marzak had helped to bring to this district that we used to not have. And the cool thing about the 7 keys that Dr. Marzak has helped to develop with this board and with the district is that these are not idle goals. Now we can actually have something that we can track. And I don't know if anybody's gone on the website very lately, but it's all out there for everyone to see. Specific goals of reaching those benchmarks, and it's tracked. And it's not all good. You see some of these things are still in red. But this is something that we are tracking as a district now because of Dr. Marzak. Another great thing about the 7 keys is now it's helped this board to be able to have a guide in the budget process. We know where to focus our funding. We have that roadmap. And that does put some responsibility on all of us as far as that funding. And we could improve on that. We'll recall last year that that the schools and principals came and told us in their keys budget what they needed for those schools to be able to reach those goals in the 7 keys. Did we as a board, did we fully fund that? No, we didn't. Yes, the county pushed back and said that they didn't want to fund everything, but did we as a board, did we stand up for the principals and the schools? No, we didn't. Instead, we let the county come in and take away over $2 million from the schools every year in order to build these new buildings up in Spring Hill. Now, if we want to talk about real harm, and I know we want to talk about the audit, we want to talk about finance, but every criticism, every single criticism that any board member can bring forward is a drop in the bucket compared to what this board did last August or last July. We allowed over $2 million to be taken away from our schools every year. This money that we no longer have is no longer going to roll into fund balance every year to be able to fix roofs. We, because of our choices and our decision, no longer have that funding to be able to fund these keys to be able to improve our schools. And we'll recall, I believe, that this excess funding that was rolling into fund balance every year is how we funded these computers that we're distributing throughout the district. We no longer have that $2 million every year. We took that away from our schools. That's something we did as a board. And again, everything that we want to nitpick pales in comparison with what our board did. The fact is, some of the issues that I'm hearing teachers complain about, a lot of that is going to be on us. So we want to talk about textbooks. We want more textbooks. We let the county take over $2 million in funding from us every year to be able to fund textbooks. We want more computers. That's gone when we let the county take over $2 million from our district and from our schools every single year for years and years and years to come. So what else yes?
There are 11 board members, and if you're going to speak for about 15 minutes, we're probably going to be here for about 2 hours if I let everybody do that. I'm happy to let you have your say, but can we come back to you and let some other people have a chance to speak at this point?
Madam Chair, this was set for a Wednesday night. I came to be able to speak. And so if a member wants to make a motion to terminate deliberate discussion, then that's perfectly fine. But if a member wants to make that, but we're having discussion, and I feel that it's my right as a member to be able to have that discussion.
You mentioned, though, that you were not going to bring up the things that you brought up in March, and you've done it. So you set that standard going forward. So I'm happy for you to continue, but we all heard what you said in March.
Okay.
So if you'll just try to make sure that you keep it
and I've moved
consistent with
beyond what we discussssed in March.
Okay.
Okay. So I highlighted those things. We're in a whole nother part of what I want to discuss now.
Okay.
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 So the second thing, so we talked about the keys. That's something we did not discuss back in March, but we're discussing it now, something that the director has brought to this board in this district. What else has the superintendent brought to us? Well, as soon as he hit the ground running, one of the very first things that he did, if this board recalls, is to bring academic coaches in for all the schools. So now we don't have a top-down approach. Instead, as far as changes happening, those are being led by the schools within each individual community of those schools. Dr. Marzak just didn't throw those coaches off in the deep end either. He partnered with Discovery Ed, and the best I can tell, Discovery Education is providing amazing training to these coaches. These coaches are collaborating with other teachers in other counties and other states, and they're bringing that knowledge and that experience back to our district. That's a good thing. Also, some of the coaches are helping teachers to understand data, so we have data coaches. Some of these teachers are helping teachers to understand how to use technology in the classroom. That's a good thing. That is a positive thing that Dr. Marzak has brought to this district. The third thing that Dr. Marzak has brought to this district is moved us towards PBL, or project-based learning. Now kids are responsible for learning, and the teachers are more as guides of that learning. It's my understanding that part of that PBL is that students make presentations, and I'm not sure if board members have noticed here lately, but I've been amazed as these students have been coming before us, and they're hardly nervous. I mean, that's just amazing to me. And I don't know if there's anything behind them having to do the presentations in the classrooms, but that could be a positive part of that. Also, since Dr. Marzak's been here, for the first time, Maury County is becoming a digital district. This is something we weren't even discussing before Dr. Marzak. Now, for the first time, think about it. Maury County is becoming a leader in our area, preparing students for the real world. Now, where we want to be as far as digital, going digital, no, we're not. We still have some funding issues. But that's where we come in as a board. We've got to work hard to be able to get that funding. One of those things is not to do agreements where we're giving away $2 million every year. Also, another resource, Dr. Marzak's brought in other resources, Myon, Dreambox, Discovery Education. I do hear complaints that it's too much, but how fast we forget. I believe when we were first elected, some of the complaints we were getting is that there were no resources. And I would much rather have that complaint, that we have too many resources rather than not enough. Another critical area that Dr. Marzak and the superintendent has been addressing is his role related to principals. Again, this is not a one-man, one-woman show. We have 22 schools and 22 principals. Superintendent, he's not teaching, he's not running the schools from day to day. And that's where he can make a real impact of our 22 schools in our district, was with these 22 principals. And so for the first time, we as a district are poaching the top talent from around the area, from around the state. It's going the other way around for the first time. Yes, that's upset a lot of people that he's been bringing in outside people. But at the end of the day, he has to hire who is the best person for the job. If there's a local person, then hands down, hire the local person. That would be my preference if there's somebody equally as qualified. But no one is entitled to a job just because they're local. At the end of the day, I think this board has been very clear that we want decisions to be made in the best interest of the children, not the best interest of the adults. Now, one of the great things, though, is what I've observed is some of our local principals have been really stepping up their game. And I think they were there all along. I think before they were being smothered, but I think now that they're starting to shine. And in fact, in my opinion, some of the best talent that we have are actually from people from within, some of the local people. Some of the greatest things that I'm seeing within the district right now are the principals, current principals, stepping up their game. But I think Dr. Marzak wants to see that to grow from within. He's providing opportunities for training so that we can start hiring others from within. Dr. Marzak has not been focused on academics. Before, we were a fix on failure. We had a $30 million backlog of overdue repairs. Now we're this close to actually catching up on those backlog repairs since Dr. Marzak came on board. As far as the data goes, it is hard to tell. We have to be reasonable. We didn't get behind overnight. It's not going to be overnight that we're going to be able to have changes. Another issue that we've had with the data is the state can't really figure out what tests they want to use. And so it's been very frustrating for me as a board member to be able to try to look at what the data is trying to tell us. And I do notice that some of our sister counties are struggling with some of these new tests as well. But there's promising signs. When Dr. Marzak came on board, before he was hired, as far as the number of our students hitting the ACT benchmarks, It was 30.7%. They were hitting at least 21 on their ACT before Dr. Marzak came on board. Now it's 38.5%. That's a 25% increase in our ACT performance. Now that's not just a statistic. Those are real students. 25% more of our students are hitting their benchmarks, are qualifying for the Hope Scholarship if they didn't otherwise qualify. So there's 25% more of our kids now that are getting that golden ticket to be able to go to college, to be able to go to a tech school, to be able to be successful at life. And that's what our mission of our board is. Now, has Dr. Marzak made some rookie mistakes along the way? Absolutely. First, we do have to acknowledge that when we hired him in 2015, we knew what we were paying for. We knew that he was a rookie. We knew that there was going to be a learning curve. And some of that wasn't our board's fault. Whenever we asked for applications, we got a lot of rookies, a lot of first-timers, a lot of newbies that applied for the job. There's not a lot of people that want to make a lateral transfer. As far as Dr. Marzak and his mistakes, what I've heard a lot of complaints that I've heard have been about a lot of internal personnel issues. And I do think we have to be careful. First of all, it's not our job. We're not the superintendent to be getting involved in personnel issues. The board is not a place to be airing out personal issues. If we do have a concern, we should do something constructive about it as a board. Look at policy, see if we can approve something, see if we can prevent something from happening again. That's our role, to be able to focus on global things, general things, policy, not nitpick, not second guess, or to use for our own private matters. Another issue, Dr. Marzak, that's been brought up is the payroll issue that we had a year ago. And I will be blunt, there's no sugarcoating that was a mess that we went through. And I will be frank, though, I believe that we're beating a dead horse. We're talking about problems that occurred back in the fall of 2016 with the prior CFO. I think we as a board, all of the members of the board love the particular CFO, but bless her heart, she was just not up to the job. This audit that we're talking about is related to that same time period. This audit is July of 2016 through June of 2017. It does appear that we're having some lingering issues, but for me personally, I believe that still flows out of the problems that we're having in the fall of 2016 of trying to untangle all the bookkeeping problems that the prior CFO had done. But let's examine it. Let's examine finance and payroll. Naturally, none of us expect a superintendent to be able to write checks, to be able to reconcile books, that sort of thing. But I do believe that the superintendent warrants some criticism. First of all, he's responsible for the hiring. Now, again, none of us personally know how to do accounting. Half the accounting terms that they use, I still scratch my head at. I don't quite understand that. I even at one point purchased a Accounting for Dummies book, and it still hasn't helped me too much. So I guess I'm just too dumb to understand all those accounting things. But we do expect our superintendent to do good hires, and I think that's fair for criticism as far as Dr. Marzak and who he hired. And it does go back to when he first started the job. While he was still new on the job, I think that's when he hired the CFO in question back in the fall of 2015. I believe that was about the time period when he hired her. And in hindsight, it's 2020. It wasn't a good hire. But to be fair, I think we all have to ask, would you or I have done anything differently? This particular individual had a doctorate. Most of us would expect that someone in that field would know what they were doing. And some of it comes down to us as a board. And historically, we have not budgeted very much for those positions. And so some of it is constrained on who you can actually hire. But that being said, also, Dr. Marzak is responsible for oversight. And it's not my call, but me personally, I do believe that the prior CFO should have been let go prior to the fall of 2016. But to be fair, if we were in Dr. Marzak's shoes at the time, would we have done anything differently? I don't know. Most of us put our trust in professionals. We believe that our professionals are handling things, that they know what they're doing, and we don't want our superintendent to necessarily have to be micromanaging things. But I think those criticisms are fair. But I'm afraid what we're doing here as a board is not helping things. I do think that our finance office has been sorting things out, and what we should be doing is keeping the water calm so that they can do that. And I truly believe that we were about to turn a corner with that. But I do believe what we've been doing is it appears that some of us have been getting involved in internal personnel issues at central office. Now, it may be well-intentioned, but I'm afraid that in some ways we've been stirring things up and making matters worse. And now we have employees that are threatening to quit. Now, as far as employees not getting along, that's as old as Adam. That's in every workplace, and it's difficult for any manager to deal with that. And so we, as a board, as members, can't get sucked into that and make the job for our superintendent harder. All we're doing is simply throwing gasoline on the fire. Now, should Dr. Marzak be held accountable for the audit? I believe he should. Ultimately, I'm not an accountant, but I do think that I agree that the buck starts with the superintendent and ultimately us. And I do think we as a board may want to consider a reprimand to the superintendent for the audit as part of his evaluation next month, which is coming up. But for me personally, I do not think that we should terminate him. Like all employees, we have to look at the good and the bad. We have to weigh that as a board. Does Dr. Marzak have shortcomings? Yes, but it's not all bad. In fact, I see what Dr. Marzak has done over these few years is laying some real foundational work for our district. And I do believe that we could have impact from that foundational work that he's doing for years and maybe decades to come. Now also, when we're making this decision here today, and this is a very serious decision, and it warrants us to be very cautious and to try to weigh all things. We're not just talking about one person. We do have to think about the good of the district. And I do believe right now what we are doing is not good for the district. Already, these distractions that we've been doing during testing, I think we're impacting the schools, and that's on us. We're right in the middle of recruiting season. Right now, we are competing for top talent throughout the state. And all of this drama and instability is not helping our district. Right now, the superintendent should be focused on recruiting great teachers and principals for opening, and we're right now taking him away from that today. And we as a board should be focused on our budget. What can we do to reach our keys? What can we do to be able to get funding for textbooks? What can we do to get funding for more computers? That's what we should be discussing right now. We should be coming together as a board, uniting and fighting for our teachers, fighting for our schools, fighting for that funding to really make systemic changes. Now, all these distractions and instability that we're creating, what are we doing that for? For what? Dr. Marzak has about 2 years left on his contract, and we're creating all of this upheaval over 2 years is what we're talking about. Now, I will remind the board that the grass is not always greener. If we terminate the superintendent, you don't know what's behind curtain B, the alternative. There's no guarantee that you're going to get anything better, and in fact, you're taking a risk that you could start the process all back over again with another new person, and you could end up being worse off. On top of this, if we made this decision, it's going to take several months to find a new director. Applicants are likely going to be a bunch of rookies like before, and we're going to be right back where we started with another learning curve. Another issue that we've already gone through 2 directors potentially in 3 years. And what is that going to do to the applicant pool? Who in their right mind would want to come to this district? And I would be very concerned that the only applicants that would want to come here are either desperate or at the bottom of the barrel. I believe that the more responsible approach for this board, Dr. Marzak has 2 years left. Let's get the data. Let's see if the seeds are starting to germinate. I think some of these things, as far as growth, is very fragile, and we don't want to take the risk of killing off some of the advances we've made. If future boards are not happy with Dr. Marzak's performance, they can start looking for somebody else, and they're going to have plenty of time to do that. But they're going to be able to do it in a thoughtful, prudent manner rather than a hasty manner like right now. Plus, I think other board members will have fresh eyes. I fear that some of us have been involved in so long that it's hard for us to see things objectively. If we do think that there's still problems with Dr. Marzak, that it's not in the past that he's still having problems, then let's help to address that. We have the upcoming evaluation next month, the board could give him a list of items that we want to see improvement on and give him a reasonable amount of time to be able to make those improvements. I will remind the board that we just recently gave him a satisfactory performance in his evaluation. The big picture is, if we make this decision, we are potentially on the hook for the entire amount of Dr. Marzak's contract. And that's going to be roughly almost $400,000 that we're looking at. I do think that because we gave Dr. Marzak a good review over the summer, it's probably going to be hard to prove cause. And so we are potentially opening up the district to potential financial consequence. And we could end up in litigation, and that's not good for either side. Ultimately, I know as far as us board members, we went through a lot together. It's not all been bad. I think we've had some good times together, but we also had some hard times. And it is easy for all of us to focus on the negative. But while it does seem like there's doom and gloom, there's some real bright spots, I believe, out there. I think there's some transformation already happening in some of our schools. Ultimately, we as board members, we're leaders. We are examples. Everyone is watching us. And I really believe if we stay positive, these changes will start to grow throughout our district. We could be that school that I talked about back in March at Mooresville in 3 to 4 years. Now, does that mean not being critical of the superintendent? No. I believe in telling it like it is. But I think we have to do things constructively and professionally. But my concern is if we let negativity take over, I'm afraid we're going to not only lose our progress, but go backwards. Now, I'm pretty sure if you all were in Dr. Marzak's seat right now, you'd want to be treated fairly. You'd want to be given a fair shake. You'd want the board members to see the bad. They're going to see the bad, but not to be blinded by personal feelings so much that they can't see the entire picture. Also, to see that this decision is not about one person, but overall what's good for the district. Now, some of you may think, well, the instability, rolling the dice again, the potential costs and potential litigation is worth that, rolling that dice. But you have to weigh that. And as a member, when I'm looking at the good as well as the bad, as well as the overall big picture, I do not believe that this motion is in the best interest of our district, and so I will be voting no. Thank you.
Ms. Kinzer?
I don't have pages and pages of notes and anything written, and the only thing personal for me is Murray County Schools. Dr. Marzak, you're right, Mr. Bates, he has brought a lot of energy, and he brought the 7 keys that Oak Ridge had adopted to us, and I think it's been a good thing. But I don't think we created the distractions that the teachers have suffered. I don't know why you would blame that on us when it was their paychecks, their overpayments, their underpayments, their insurance, their annuities, retirement, all of those things that happened in 2016 and still are happening now. My concern is that you said we hired a rookie, but you chose to pay that rookie $180,000, way more than had ever been, and 10th in the state. And I don't object to that as long as we have someone that's a leader and a manager. Not somebody that just goes to the school. Dr. Marzak's the greatest PR in the world. He can go anywhere. He's friendly. He's affable. He's all the things that you would want the superintendent to be outside of the building. But what we need is a manager. We need somebody that's in charge. We need somebody that has to make the tough decisions. If you feel the need to fire a principal, a 30-year principal, who has a school with great scores, whose husband is dying, and you fire them the week before Christmas, then I think you should be the leader and do it yourself and not have a subordinate call them. I think that you should be a leader and allow them to come and speak to you. And now that person is trying really hard to pay back the overpayment that was made, and she's not getting any resolution of that. But that's just one example, I think, and that's just an emotional one because we're all of us that have been teachers and our principals and how we feel about them. But once of all, those are the tough things. That's the things that a manager, a leader, the person in charge has to do, the tough things, not just go out and enjoy the wonderful day like we did at Highland and Riverside and all those schools that are having these great things going on. So exciting. If that's all I had to do, I'd do it for free. It was wonderful. But you're paid $180,000 to stay in the central office and make sure things are run right. And when things are brought to you as to how to right the ship, then it is your responsibility to do it, even though it might be tough. I feel that leadership is something it's not something that you feel comfortable with. Maybe it's just something you have to have the stamina, the fortitude to do the tough things, not just the joyful things. I don't think this is pleasant. I didn't get on the board to be part of something like this. I'm not happy that we're discussing this, but I'm not happy when the auditors came to us and we had people that fell on the sword that night that said, you know, I messed up, I'm sorry, it's my fault. And at one point, I think at some time we asked Dr. Marzak, do you take any responsibility? No, I wouldn't change anything. I say, you can't change what you don't acknowledge. You cannot. And is everybody perfect? Absolutely not. People make mistakes. You've got to acknowledge those mistakes. You can't move forward until you know what would do better. I think that board policy has been ignored. I think there are many policies that were ignored, maybe even Ms. Powers when on the complaint procedure, that was board policy that wasn't followed. I think that even we could go back to what happened in Culleoka with Tad Cummings. We didn't see Dr. Marzak during that time. The Culleoka teachers didn't see Dr. Marzak in that time. Here was a spokesman, here was the person of our school, and he wasn't there. He was not front and center. Kind of like when you fire a principal and you let somebody else do it. Take the hard job. And if you survive this tonight, Dr. Marzak, I hope that these will make you a better person, that you will realize that all we want is for you to run a tight ship, that you aren't just somebody that's that status symbol or that person who could speak about anything, anywhere. And I do like that you put a positive front forward in our schools, but make it accurate. Don't go out there and tell them that our grades are great, everything's great. We need the community to know that we're working hard to get those grades up. We're not there yet. I'm not going to spend 35 minutes going over all the things from the past. And I am sorry we're here for this, but I just don't think you're the person for the job now.
Mr. Penny?
Well, I'm not as eloquent as Mr. Bates. But I would say we've had complaints about the keys. Well, I had a board member say, well, when he brought the keys here, it was plagiarism because they had those keys in at Knoxville. Well, I'm sorry, but as a professional or anybody else, if you don't bring your experience from one job to another job, you're a fool. That's not plagiarism, that's using your knowledge. I'm not sure that Dr. Marzak fired the entire finance department. He maybe fired some people in the finance department, but I don't think he fired the whole finance department, which was stated. If he did, okay, he did, but I'm not sure he did. And as far as the finance department, when he tries to hire somebody and he wants to raise wages because, by the statements made here. You're not gonna get people off the street to do the job. You can get anybody off the street for $30,000 or $40,000 to come in and have more findings from the audit department. But every time Dr. Marzak asks to be able to hire a position at a decent wage, which in any other school district they would get, there's complaints from members of this board beyond imagination. Central office is getting paid too much money. You want somebody to manage a $94 to $100 million budget. You don't pay them $30,000 a year. You pay them what they're worth. As far as Dr. Marzak's starting wage, we made that starting wage on the advice of the company that we hired to advise us on how to hire a superintendent. That's how we came up with the wage to offer Dr. Marzak or any other one we hired at that time. And as far as terminating for cause and violating policy, members of this board have violated policy 1.101 and 1.201. They've violated that policy numerous times. We don't get involved with managing the central office unless something like this happens, and that is policy. If Dr. Marzak wants to walk up to Mr. Lang, and I'm using him because I talked to him today, wants to walk up to Mr. Lang and say, you're not doing your job, you're terminated, or demote him. In reality, unless he comes and appeals to the board, that's not our concern. That's what we hired Dr. Marzak for. Is he too nice a guy? I've told him to his face several times. You're darn right he is. Because there's several people that I've talked and met with and had experience with in my 10 years on this board that if they worked for me, I would have fired them. And I think they probably should have been fired. We're bringing up before the board now of programs that we once canceled because they're not working. A lot of the programs we know they're not working because the teachers don't like the programs, so they're not using them. The only way this board can know if a program that we've instituted and Dr. Marzak has instituted is working is if when teachers are asked to use that program, they use it. And if it doesn't work after you've used it and given it a good try, come back to this board and say, this program doesn't work. And we'll get rid of it. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I'm sorry, you work for me. You don't do what I tell you. You don't work for me.
Mr. Beaver?
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Bates was talking about the how great the keys are, and I agree. There's some good there, a lot of good. But are we graded by the state on keys, our keys program? I don't think so. And you know, if we look at our test scores from 2017, which we don't have any for this year, but we right at the bottom. There's one school system that is below us, and that's Metropolitan Nashville. I mean, we're sitting right on the bottom, and that's where we were when Dr. Marzak came on board. So, you know, what the state is grading us on, we haven't budged a bit. And you know, if you look at it, our K2, we don't have any resources for K2 program. And you know, and then we wonder how come kids can't read when they get into third grade. And if our teachers are trying to make their own curriculum, that tells me that different schools are getting taught different ways, different methods. And so, I mean, you know, there's no unity there. And then we wonder why we don't have any money, but we spent $800,000 on VACO, and we still got the same problems that we had before we spent the $800,000. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to speak to some of the things that we have heard, and I actually really enjoyed some of the comments that Mr. Bates made, because I felt like I was back in 2015 when I had the vision in my head of what we were looking for in a superintendent, and all of that description, and it sounded so good. And that is exactly what my high hopes were back then. And Mr. Bates, I think you described it to a T of what it would look like in my fantasy back then. However, that is not what we are living today. And I also feel like I was very scolded for giving money away, and that I should be fighting for teachers and for principals. And I feel like I just took a scolding when, you know what, I am very proud of that I am in schools, and that I do talk to principals, and I do talk to teachers, and I feel like I represent them and their voice on this board. So while I appreciate opinions that were given, I feel like the voice of teachers and principals is very different. And in that email that I sent out earlier in the week for the proficiency at one of our middle schools, when 8th grade math is 0, that is just vastly different than some of the stats that were given during your eloquent monologue. And I would like to speak to the fact that we did hire a rookie. We interviewed all of the individuals that we interviewed were would be rookies in a head superintendent position. Not one of them had head superintendent experience. But since I was at every one of those meetings, and those were long, they were from 6 p.m. till often 10 and 11:30, and those questions that we developed, we were a good, unified, strong, dedicated board, and we all turned in questions, and they were good. And they were questions that were comprehensive. It was everything that we wanted. And the answers that were given in that interview were spot on. 10 out of 10. That is why that unified and healthy board all chose Dr. Marzak first. And where we are today is not fulfillment of the answers that we were given. I believe it was Mr. Dudley's question that was, can you have hard conversations and let people go, terminate them when necessary? That is one of the most strong answers that I recall from that interview, and that is not the road that we are walking today. So, one of the other questions, what will a day be like? And the answer thrilled my soul, because I'm not going to be in the office. I'm going to be out in schools. Well, there's so many schools that tell me they never see him. And I am proud of the questions we asked. I'm proud of that interview process, and I know what I heard then, and I know what I see now, and they are two different things. I would also like to speak to, I understand being a rookie and first time on the job. I was there one time, as every one of us was. However, I put huge value in learning from mistakes. And in all of our complaints tonight, no one has brought up Culleoka, which is a big mistake, and there is a lawsuit because of that. But at that time, we were told that he had asked the two people accused, and they said they didn't do it. And so, what else were we supposed to do? Was kind of the answer that we were given. There was another issue where a safety complaint was made, and again, the two accused people were asked, and no one else. And I do not think that is learning from mistakes. And that is what I expect of someone who is being paid $175,000 upon hire and then given a raise to $180,000, learning from mistakes. And if y'all will humor me, I will tell you why I hold this so close. But when I was a brand new nurse practitioner, my first job was for a transplant team. All my patients were very complicated. And I misprescribed a medicine one time, and that patient came in and was having a small side effect. And I had to look that patient in the eye and say, I could have said, oh, the pharmacist should have caught that. Oh, my precepting physician could have caught that. Instead, I looked them in the eye and I was like, I've made a mistake. Here's how we are going to correct it. Here's how we're going to follow you through safely. To this day, I guarantee you I've never made that mistake twice. I've never made it again, so I didn't make the mistake twice. I see repeated mistakes, and I really believe in accountability and learning from mistakes, and I don't see that. And I think that's part of being a rookie, but I think you grow through it, and I don't see growth. Thank you.
I like the quote, to whom much is given, much is expected. And I think Maury County Public Schools has given Dr. Marzak a lot, and has expected a lot. We took a chance on an unknown assistant superintendent who hadn't been successful in previous attempts to become a superintendent, but we believed in him. I truly believe that the teachers, the principals, the staff, they want him to succeed. We as a board want him to succeed. None of us take pleasure in having this discussion tonight. I certainly don't. He took a chance on us. He put down roots here in Maury County, and I appreciate that. He showed us that the grass is greener where you water it. He has certainly been a tireless promoter of Maury County Public Schools. And for that, I really am appreciative of that, because I think he did change the perception of Maury County Public Schools. He was the change that we needed at the time. But 3 years have passed since we made that decision, and I think now is the time to evaluate whether or not Dr. Marzak is still the right leader for Maury County Public Schools. Now, some may argue that this is too soon to make that decision, but I actually recently had a mutual friend of mine and Dr. Marzak's who had a conversation with him, and that friend asked him if he knew the average tenure for a superintendent. Without hesitation, Dr. Marzak said 3 years. First year is a honeymoon. We definitely had a honeymoon. The second year, you start to find problems. We definitely started to find problems. And the third year, you look to see if those problems get fixed. And if they don't get fixed, the board has a tough decision. And that's where we are tonight. I think that we really need to look at whether or not those problems are fixed. I will say that I personally began to lose trust in Dr. Marzak in December of 2016, which was about 18 months ago, and that was when our hardworking Maury County Public School employees did not get their check, and that's not acceptable. There were promises that were made at that time that it would be fixed, there would be no more payments would be missed, insurance and retirement premiums, those would all be paid, everything was going to be cleared up. We would also have policies and procedures, and those were going to be implemented so this would never, ever happen again. But it still happens. I get emails almost every week from somebody that has an issue with finance or HR type issue. And so to me, that's one of the many misstatements that Dr. Marzak has made to this board about the status of our financial situation. The audits we've talked about for the last 2 years, they've been abysmal. I don't think there's any way around that. But instead of it getting better, I think we've actually gotten worse. And I think someone had said that Dr. Marzak, he inherited this mess. And I would disagree, because I went back and I looked at the audit before he arrived. And the last audit that was a combination of Mr. Hickman and Ms. Johnson's year, there were 2 audit findings, I believe. This year we had 11. We're not going in the right direction. The biggest problem to me about those audit findings, they're not minor. I'm going to quote directly from it, but these were some of the words that were used repeatedly in that. It said deficiencies attributed in part to ineffective management oversight, a lack of technical skills to maintain records in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, the failure to correct the prior year's audit finding, and management's failure to implement their own corrective action plan. The word material weakness was used. The auditors, they actually told us at the April 9th audit specially called session that we had, that really when they say material weakness, what they mean is that's a big number. That's a big number, and it impacts every financial statement that we got in the past year. So they feel like those numbers were big enough that it would actually be something that would be large enough to change that financial consideration. And they also said that a large portion of our books were unaudited because of those material weaknesses. So just think about it. We don't actually know where we are at the end of last year's audit. They couldn't give us that answer. But we as board members, we've continued to spend. And we've continued to do that at the recommendation of Dr. Marzak. It is certainly, I know we have some county commissioners here tonight, it's certainly a lot easier for us to spend, and then when they have to deal with the tax issue, they certainly don't enjoy that. The budget process, it's always difficult, but I think we've all, and when I say all, I mean this board and actually the county commission, they've made a commitment to us. I think when I first came on the board, our budget was about $87 million. I think the budget we're looking at now is over $110 million. And even in the last year, we've already spent over $100 million just from last year's budget. So that's a pretty big increase. And so we can quibble about whether or not we got everything that we wanted. But the point is that we've gotten more in the last 3 years than we've gotten in a long time. I know we've also been making financial decisions, not only based on those financial statements, but actually based on the advice of our financial staff and of Dr. Marzak. I remember being in a budget meeting last year, and we actually were told that we had, I want to say, almost $20 million that was going to be going into fund balance. Our most recent discussion about fund balance was basically that we shouldn't be spending any of it in the next year. I don't know how we went from having potentially $20 million to maybe like $2 or $3 million and being told not to spend that. So where has that extra spending gotten us? That's the part that really is most concerning to me, because I agree with Mr. Beaver and I agree with Mr. Bates. Our single goal has to be working for the benefit of the children and for their education. So where are we when it comes to that? I was provided, after some back and forth, with the PowerPoint that was provided to the principals at the beginning of this year. That PowerPoint went through the 2 TEN Ready tests that they took last year for 2016, 2017, and the prior year. It provided a comparison for those test results based on the state and based on other counties. And what was really interesting to me is, and I'll hold this up, but the blue is us, and we're at the bottom on every single one. We're at the bottom there, that's ELA, for 3 through 8, against the state, by the way. This is us for math, for the state. We're the blue, we're at the bottom. This is science, same thing. Then you can compare us to other counties. This is us at the very bottom. We're still behind the state. We're behind most of these other 10 counties that were picked by staff. And the only one that we beat on this one was Davidson. But actually in math for 3 through 8 last year, Davidson got us on math. They were actually ahead of us. So we were at the very bottom last year. Science, we beat Davidson. So our scores are lower than most of our surrounding counties. For math, ELA, and science, we scored slightly higher than Davidson in ELA and science, and actually we were about the same in math. And it's noted on here that grade 5 is particularly low in both ELA and math. Why is that? Again, we've spent a bunch of money. but we don't have resources for some of those grades that feed into it. So then you've got to look, that's for the elementary and middle schools. Then you have to look at whether or not these kids are going to be ready to be college and career ready, right? So they have to take end of course exams. This is us against the state. Bottom. And I'm just going to skip through to give you guys the summary, but I'll have them available if anybody would like to look at them. Our scores, when you look at year to year, and by the way, they use the same test is what the note said. So they actually had the same test in 2016 and 2017 for those EOCs. So all the problems that they're having with the state, I can't help it, but they took the same test is what it says. But our scores actually went down in all areas except for ELA. The ELA scores, they increased an average of 2.3. Our science scores, and we're talking about STEM a lot of times, our science scores for chemistry down 10.8%, 8.5% for biology. U.S. history was down 9.4%. Then you can also look at us against the state, comparing 2017 to how the state did in 2017. Again, we scored below the state in all individual subject areas except algebra, where we tied. MCPS math scores were 2.5% lower than the state. English was 3.1% lower than the state. History was 9.8% lower than the state. And science was 14.5% lower than the state. I'm not pleased with that. And I don't know how any of us up here can be pleased with that, unless we're saying that we've done everything that we can. And, you know, Mr. Bates had actually mentioned that Dr. Marzak was having us focus on academics versus the architects. I know I've sat through a lot of these meetings, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard from Hewlett Spencer and ESA or architects. We talk about building stuff all the time, but what actually goes on inside that building, sometimes it's an act of God to be able to get that information to us as board members, and that's unfortunate. You know, I know that it's not all doom and gloom, and I'm not trying to make it out that it's all doom and gloom. I want us to be successful. I just want us to get behind someone as a board that we can put our faith in. I'm telling you that I've lost my faith just because we've had 18 months being told that, you know, finance problems are going to be solved, and they're not solved. What I think about is our strategic plan. We spent a whole day working together as a group, and we talked about how we wanted to be not a good organization, we wanted to be a great organization. And so the question that we have to ask ourselves is Dr. Marzak going to get us to great? Now, some people have said that it's only 2 more years. I hope you will tell that to all the Murray County taxpayers who have lost thousands of dollars under his mismanagement. I get emails saying, you know, oh, I was told I don't have to pay that money back. I've gotten those type of emails. Just the audit itself said we almost had $200,000 that walked out the door. So, and I haven't seen yet where we've gotten any of it collected back. That's not for me to micromanage, though. That's for Dr. Marzak to report to us as a board and as taxpayers. We as taxpayers, we need to know that. If you say it's only 2 years, tell it to the parents. I am a parent. And while I'm very satisfied with a lot of things in my child's school, I am really ticked off that my child does not have books. I'm really ticked off that we've spent this much money and we don't have computers. You talk about being digital, we don't have a computer in everybody's hand. You talk about making sure that the students have what they need. They don't even have a textbook to bring home if they need it. They're given a class set, and maybe some kids will get to take it home. It's just ridiculous to me, and I just think that we are doing our parents a huge disservice. Again, I just go back to, I think the time is now for us to decide if Dr. Marzak can get us to great. Recently, a quote was shared with us that was from Mitt Romney, and it stated, "Leadership is about taking responsibility, not making excuses." I have yet to see Dr. Marzak take responsibility. The promises have been great, but the execution and the accountability have been dreadful. So the time for excuses, to me, is over for this board. I agree. We have to take responsibility as well. We have to believe that we can become better. And it begins by us not making excuses for our leader or for ourselves. So I hope others will join me in taking that responsibility. We all had good intentions. None of us do this work without good intentions. I truly believe that. I believe every single one of us up here has good intentions for what we want to see throughout our system. Not at one school, not at two schools, but at all of our schools. We really do. And I want to use a football metaphor because I know a lot of us like football. I know a lot of us like to use analogies up here. I would say that we drafted Vince Young in the first round. I'm a VY fan. I like Vince Young. However, Vince Young, he won a playoff game. But if you look at his completion rate, it's less than 50%. And the bottom line is he was not going to lead us or the Titans to a Super Bowl. Dr. Marzak is not getting us to greatness. It is never too late to make the right decision. And that's why I plan on righting a wrong. I was one of those people that fully supported Dr. Marzak when he came on. And I was definitely a part of that honeymoon period. But it's time for our board to demand accountability in some way, shape, or form. But I do think that terminating Dr. Marzak's contract in this third year is the right decision for this board. Ms. Powers?
May I speak again? As I kind of look back over the last few months of our meetings and what we talk about and spend so much of our time about, we are really putting so much emphasis on things, and so it is very rare. In those things that we're focused on, I rarely hear us talk about kids, and I just want to say, I see a lot of teachers here. I speak to a lot of teachers, and I want to say thank you all. Thank you very much that despite what we're dealing with up here, thank you. I feel like every day y'all are in the classroom trying to do what's good for kids. I appreciate y'all. I see it, and I very much value you. I did recently, I feel like I hear from and speak to a lot of teachers, and recently I had a long conversation with a teacher that I very much valued it. And in summary, our teachers really work hard. They do great things for kids, and they are not apathetic towards teaching. I think they're very apathetic, however, towards the central office and the inability to trust what they hear. And I just want to speak to you all that despite challenges, thank you for being in the classroom every day with our kids. And I think that's why I will be voting to make a change in our leadership.
I do want to say, I know Mr. Dudley, you had mentioned moving things around with regards to the 81 Act. I just want to speak to that briefly because I do think that it plays into this decision. I think that this motion is on there in part because it's probably very likely that the county will be taking over our finance department in very short order, I would imagine. And the problem I have is that I don't feel like we as the board can go to them and say, we got it. We got this all covered. I wish we could, but I do not trust repeating that because of the fact that I heard it 18 months ago that everything was going to be fine. And I know that that's not the case. I think that our county has some concerns about how we spend money. Us as a board, us at the direction of Dr. Marzak, I think there's a reason why when they revised their 81 Act, they made it to where it did not include the superintendent sitting on that committee to make decisions about how that money would be spent. And I think that's very glaring. I don't know how they will end up voting on the 81 Act. I would hope that we've shown that we are dedicated to trying to resolve this. I think we have a good start in place. I think that Ms. Gagliano has come in and she's, I think, done an admirable job. But I don't know that it's all cleaned up. And so I think it's hard to say that to the county. But again, I don't think it's our job to manage that. But maybe instead of going out to schools, maybe somebody needs to sit down and just say, why are we still having all these problems with the budget? Why do we keep coming to budget meetings and things aren't like they're supposed to? I don't know. I know that for me, and if I were running the business, I would probably lock everybody in a room and say, we're not leaving until we get these numbers figured out. But we don't micromanage. So we have to turn to our leader to make sure that he makes that decision. And thus far, I do not think that decision's been made. So we're going to continue to flounder until we get some leadership. And leadership is hard. And we just have to figure out whether or not we have the right person to do that. All right, seeing no other lights, I think we're ready to vote.
Can I get a chance to defend myself? Because
Certainly.
a lot of things being said, so I wasn't sure if I get a chance to talk for a minute. Is it okay? Are you sure? Okay. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Okay. So, yeah, it has been an interesting almost 3 years. It'll be 3 years, August of 2018. To say that mistakes were made on my part would be an understatement. I've made mistakes. I really have. What I try to do each month when I come in here is I try to make recommendations to the board that I think would be in the best interest of the district moving forward. Sometimes those recommendations are listened to, sometimes they're not. And then what we have to do and what I have to do as a superintendent is go back the next day and figure out how are we going to make this work with the recommendation that was either accepted or the recommendation that wasn't accepted. And I like to feel that as a superintendent as a district, I have done the best that I could possibly do with the resources that I was given to the point we're currently here. I also have a feeling that our staff has done the best that they can do with the resources they were given to the point that we're here. I believe our principals have done that. I believe our teachers have done it. I believe our bus drivers have done it. Our cafeteria workers, you go on down the line. There is no doubt to say that there are not hardworking people in Maury County Public Schools, which is one of the reasons why I continue to freak principals out by telling them we have one of the best districts in the state, because I see it. You just have to believe it. I see it every single day. I'm not from here, and I see it every single day. I see the makings of one of the best districts in the state. Test scores are included in the keys. They're a part of each of the keys that are applicable. One of the things I do want to remind the board is at the end of the 15-16 year, we were a level 5 district. We were one of the highest performing districts in the state at a level 5. In the year 16-17, we dropped down to a level 1, along with numerous other districts across the state, to the point that they created an inverted bell curve where more districts in the state were level 1 or level 5 than they were 2, 3s, or 4s. So we're not the only ones that dropped this year to one of the lower performance levels. It hit almost 40-something districts across the state. K through 2 resources are definitely a problem. They are. Saying that kids can't read, looking at the scorecard and looking at the work the teachers are doing with kids and making sure that they have the literacy skills that they need, they're growing and getting better over time with the resources that they do have in the classroom. It's not going to happen overnight. We do deal with some difficult populations, but our teachers and our principals are working their hardest every single day to help as many kids learn how to read as they possibly can. The keys take time to grow. You've heard me say multiple times it takes 3 to 5 years to implement change. When we implemented the keys in January of 2016, and we didn't even get the ball rolling until August of 2016, that means we're really kind of approaching the end of year 2. It's going to be another year before we see growth, but we've already seen some phenomenal growth. Look at key number 7. I didn't expect key number 7 to hit 50% for another 2 to 3 years. Yet as of fall break, 58.1% of our kids are accessing one of those resources in key number 7. That means that teachers and principals saw the vision and then they got after it because they realized to have a kid walk across a stage without a pathway and a track in life is unacceptable. And I'm proud of them for doing that. It blew me away to the point that I asked Anita to run the data a second time. We cannot have gone from 29% in 14-15 to 58.1% in the third quarter of the 2017-18 year. That's not possible, but it happened. It did. I've heard a lot tonight about things that happened during the 16-17 year. And to kind of summarize something that Mr. Bates did bring up, my summative evaluation for the 16-17 year was a level 4 out of 5. And in the state of Tennessee, that's above expectations. I will say that one of the things I was asked is what has been our payroll success this year? And I ran that data for you guys. And we are sitting at 99.99% payroll success rate. We have a 0.01 margin of error. I looked up what is the industry standard. The industry standard is a 1% margin of error every pay period. We are beating that by a large margin. So our teachers are being paid correctly. Schools say that they never see me. You guys, for the ones that follow me on social media, you see where I am throughout the entire course of the day. You don't even have to have Twitter. You can go to twitter.com/myusername and you can see where I am. You know, it's kind of tough for me as a superintendent because I hear board members say we want you in the office, but then I hear other board members say we want you in schools. So I do the best every single day to juggle that as much as I can. Because you're right. We have almost 13,000 students. We have over 1,600 employees that need to see me, that I need to tell them they're doing a good job. And I try to do my best every single day to tell every single person you're doing a good job. You know, Culleoka, I can't really comment about that. That's pending litigation. But I think you can go by what was entered into the newspaper, where the Board of Education said we did everything correctly that we were supposed to do by law. And we're fighting back against that pending litigation. If something had gone wrong, that statement would not be in there, and we would be settling out of court. Too much is given, much is expected. You're exactly right, Chair Parker. You're exactly right. What hurts me is that I lost confidence going back to December 2016. So for the last 1.5 years, I've been basically fighting an uphill battle to run this district. And to me, that's been extremely difficult. It's been very difficult because going back to what Mr. Penning said, there are certain board members that have violated certain policies and have become involved in the management of the district. So while I'm trying to lead the district, while I'm trying to work with principals, while I'm trying to work with teachers, while I'm trying to work with departments, I'm also fighting that uphill battle as well. And as a superintendent, it is extremely difficult to have that entire world on your shoulder. But I do the best I can with a smile every single day. I don't go off on anybody on social media. I don't come in these meetings and I don't yell at people. I don't make personal attacks. I don't cut people off. I don't make snide comments. Because every single day I come into this district because this district needs strong leadership. It needs strong leadership. And Ms. Kinzer, I'm sorry. I am the person for the job. I do exhibit strong leadership, and I make the tough decisions when they have to be made. I do. The audit? Yeah, the audit was bad. The budget was built on my 11th month on the job. I was 11th month on the job when the budget was built, and the budget was built incorrectly. That's what led to the problems during the 16-17 year. And I tell you what, if I could go back to that 11th month, oh, the stuff that I would tell Dr. Marzak at that time. I would sit him down and have a great conversation. Did I make mistakes? Yes. And I'm sorry for those mistakes because they've hurt a lot of people in this room. Hey, I wasn't paid either. A lot of us weren't paid correctly, and that rests on me. Mr. Moore gave me some good feedback. He said, Chris, I need you to see you take ownership of that. And I sent an email out to the entire district, and I believe my words were, this is my fault, and I apologize, and I'm sorry for it, and we're going to make it better. At the end, I do want to comment that the auditors fixed off and signed off all our financials. They certified it. And they also said that there was no fraud and there was no theft. So our 16-17 budget was signed off on. The fund balance recommendation that you're getting as a board is recommended to hold to see our financial flesh out, to see where we are. We have a brand new CFO, and she just wants to get a hold and see where everything is. That's what she wants to do. You know, when will she trust the numbers? At the end of the year where she's had a chance to develop her budget and see her budget flesh out and see her budget come to fruition. That's when she's going to trust the numbers. And I don't blame her for not trusting them at this point because it's not her budget. Go back to April of 2017. I said, guys, we need to hire a CFO and we need to get them in here before the school year starts. The recommendation was to hold off. And we weren't able to hire Ms. Gagliano until October, November, with a budget that she did not develop, with a budget that she is having to figure out, because a $100 million budget or a $102 million budget is massive. It is huge, and she's one person. It's very difficult to manage. Test scores from the state. I'm going to go back to that really quickly. I walk into schools, and I see teachers and principals killing it every single day. The problem we didn't have in our district was alignment. There wasn't always an ability to ensure that what students were going to be assessed on is what students were learning in the classroom. But Dr. Woodard laid out his academic expectations this year. We've had numerous conversations with principals and teachers. They now know what's expected. They know what students are supposed to be learning, and they're bringing those experiences into the classroom. What I'm really excited about are the teachers that have found a way to measure and meld what's to be assessed while also making learning exciting and fun for kids. And that's through project-based learning, communication, and interactive activities. They found a way to do both. They've bridged the gap, and those excite me. Because you're right, Ms. Kinzer, if you had been at Highland Park yesterday, my mind was blown out of the water because they found a way to bridge the gap between what needs to be learned and having fun at the exact same time. When I sat there with a third grade student who had the claws like a lizard, and I thought I was at the Nashville Zoo listening to a reptile expert. He could tell me everything that was going on inside that rainforest. That child has had the bridge gapped between what he needs to know and what he's going to be assessed on at the end of the year. And I'm extremely proud of that progress that our teachers have made. Extremely proud. Textbooks, that's a conversation that we need to have as a district. Are we going paper, pencil, or are we going digital? Where do we need to put our resources? Because we can't do both. We don't have enough money to do both. When I came here, this board said, Dr. Marzak, we want you to lead us in a digital transition. We want to be a one-to-one district. And 3 to 4 months into the job, I looked at Commissioner Craig Harris when he looked at me in a county commission meeting and said, Dr. Marzak, when are we going one-to-one? And I told him, stop. No. We need to put the brakes on it, because what comes first is training and professional development, then devices. Devices don't come first. And I actually had to look at a county commissioner and say, don't give us the money, we're not ready yet. We need to have that discussion because we're not there yet. We haven't decided as a board what's important. Now in the strategic plan, you put fund diploma. So that's where I've taken my direction to this point. Paper and pencil resources were not added to the strategic plan. So as a board, we need to have that discussion. Where are we going? Because I'm taking my direction from the strategic plan. That's why we have the surveys up on the website. I'm implementing the strategic plan as it has been delivered to me when it was voted on in December. I've told multiple board members that I'll continue to invest in Murray County as long as those people continue to invest in me. I want to stay here. This is a great place. Do I feel I've gotten 100% investment from everybody in this board? No. But I've still tried to lead the charge to make this the best district in the state of Tennessee. And we're getting national recognition. And now we're getting money. We got the $500,000 grant from Parker Hannafin over at Mount Pleasant High School. I'm going to bust Dr. Woodard's bubble. We won the $255,000 arch grant to bring Crayola into the district. And not only that, today, Stan Breeden was named by Train as their person for Industrial Maintenance Supervisor of the Year. We are being recognized on a local, regional, and national level for the work that we are doing. We have numerous teachers in this district, like Leanne Simmerman, that is going to speak in national conferences and telling people how education looks in the 21st century. Jessica Vasquez is another one at Randolph Howell, being brought into national conferences to say this is how we're doing in Murray County Public Schools. We have districts from around the country visiting our schools because they're wanting to learn what it's like for kids to have an exciting education. Same thing with Casey, thank you. She went to Denver, Colorado to learn more about what it looks like to bridge education and economic development together. When she said where she was from, Murray County, they stopped. And she told me, they said, listen, we hear about your mechatronics program, kids getting an associate's degree. Can we stop for a second and you tell us about that? She went from being a participant in an invitation-only economic development event in Denver, Colorado, to now leading the group talking about education in Murray County. We have an 18-year-old student that is now qualified for the Naval Propulsion Academy because of his teacher and what he's learning in the mechatronics program at Central High School. If that's not turning outcomes out for kids that weren't there previously, I don't know what is. So I hope that you continue to invest in me. I hope we continue to push this district forward and make it the best in the state of Tennessee, because we are on the edge of the golden age. And I would love to walk this journey with you. But if you vote me out, I'm going to say thanks for the opportunity. I greatly appreciate it, and I wish you guys the best.
All right, seeing no other lights, I think we are ready to vote.
Miss Betty, would you put my vote as no, please? Miss Shirley, would you put my vote as no, please?
Mr. Dudley, did you register yours? All right, that motion fails. 5-6. We'll move on to the 1981 Act. Mr. Dudley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'd like to make a motion that we send a letter to the commission opposing the 81 Act, the modified 81 Act at this time.
Do we have any discussion? All right, we're ready to vote.
Miss Shirley, my vote is yes.
You have everybody's vote. That motion did pass. We have a motion to adjourn. We have a motion. We have a second.
I would just like to ask a question, and I don't know if it's an appropriate question or not. Seeing this motion failed, it failed in March or last month. We've been talking about this for 3 months. Are we as a board going to put this to rest, or are we going to keep bringing this up month after month?
This is actually the first time that we've actually voted on it, but I will just say that if a board member asks for something to be put on the agenda, I've never objected to it. So if another board member chooses to put it on again, that's their decision. And we can go through this exercise again, but I think at this point, I think that the board has spoken, and I think it's important that we get behind Dr. Marzak and the strategic plan that we have, and hope and pray that he can move our system forward. Ms. Kinzer.
I'd like to speak to that too. I think the decision has been made, Mr. Pennings, and as we leave here tonight, board policy says we leave as one board. I said that in my statement, that if whatever the wishes are, that we will give him our full support. But we're always going to be cognizant of, and listening to the teachers and listening to staff and being aware of what's going on. How could we not? I'm proud of these teachers in the schools, but I do think as a board we have to act as one. It's not about individuals at all. So as we leave here today, we'll leave just like we came in, as friends and supporters of Murray County Schools.
I appreciate that, and I've always said, whether I agree with the decision or not, at the end of the board meeting, the only thing I should say to the press is you heard my comments during the meeting. I support the decision of the board. And I support all the teachers and everyone else. I hope we all get behind Dr. Marzak, and I hope we do get to be the greatest district in the state or the country, because we can do it with all your help.
I think we had a motion and a second, so we are adjourned.